Today we're going to be constructing an H-brace. An H-brace is the foundation of your fence system. This is a very important part of your fence as it builds up the rest of your fence line as you go and build lengths and miles of fence. So the foundation of your fence, being the H-brace, needs to be of quality products. This H-brace here today is just some recycled material I'm using just for this demonstration. But what we want to focus on our corners, they need to be at least 8 foot long. So you have about 3 foot in the ground and around 5 foot above ground. And as far as the diameter, you can get away from anywhere from 6 to 10 inches, preferably somewhere around that 8-inch mark. So now that you have your corners established, part of your bracing is important as well. You want to take 2.5 times the height of your fence, being the length of this. So say your fence is 4 foot high, you would need a 9-foot beam here. And then we'll also use a cross or a guide wire to bring this all together and have it as one unit to where it works off of each other with leverage. So I'm going to explain some of the tools that are needed to make this successful and easy. So the very first thing, we're going to start here and are some wire splices and taps. And what these are going to do is these are going to take the smooth high tensile wire when we do our cross beam, and we're going to use this to connect the two ends of wire. The second thing are your regular fence staples. Next is when you get your H-brace built and are ready to run your high tensile wire, you'll need some insulators. And this is another style of insulator that we use off and on. Sometimes we'll see that the wire doesn't come across perfectly and we'll want to touch this guide wire, so we'll put these on there to keep that from shorting out. The next is a trusty hammer. Then we have our crimping tool. So this is what actually tightens our taps and our crimps explained here. Then this is our tensioning tool. So we use this donut inline fines tensioning tool to tighten the guide wire, and this is the tool that we use to do that. You can also use a ratcheting style inline tensioner, which then we can use a crescent wrench, and obviously a crescent wrench is handy for various other things too. Then we have our fencing pliers and just a regular set of side cuts. So once we have this 9-foot post in, we got to figure out how to mount it to the side post. So the way that we can do this is we can take a big spike or a large nail and we actually drive it through this round post into the post. It's the same on both sides. We want to make sure this is level as well when we do it. Now once the post is mounted, we're going to take our brace wire. So how we put that brace wire together is we'll put a staple on this post and a staple on the outside of this post as well, and that's going to hold our wire in place. Then we're going to take this high tensile wire and make this brace wire by making a figure 8, and it'll hold this post together. So now I'll do that and you'll see how it's done. What we did here building this H-brace was put our brace wire on. So we took high tensile wire and we did a figure 8 around both posts and we crossed it here. So keeping this figure 8'd like this keeps it off of our electric wires when our insulator's on the outside of the post. So that's why we want this crossed here. Sometimes you can do two runs through this, and most of the time one single run will work. So to get this these two dead ends put back together, we used our crimps and we put 2 of them on just for extra strength. And then for a little last line of security, we bend those wires back just to keep them in place a little bit better and snug. So once all this wire was connected and crossed here in the middle, we put our tensioner on. So this, you just simply set it over the wire in this groove here. And once that's in the groove, you take this tensioning tool and you just ratchet it around. And so once you feel like you've got your brace tight enough and snug, then you'll take this pin and lock it on each side of the wire, and that's what locks it in place. So an important thing to remember when running your brace wire and setting this up is to make sure this brace wire is running the correct way. So in this particular situation, this would be our far corner post and our fence line would be running this way. So you'd want this on top in the way that the fence is running. And the bottom of the wire is at your main corner, which sometimes is a bigger, deeper post because all of your leverage is coming from there and it's helping it support each other. So that's why it's important to keep your brace wire running with the fence line. So right now that we have our brace wire done, I can go ahead and tighten and hammer this bottom staple in farther. I left it loose just to give me some slack to get my wire through, but we don't want it all the way touching the wire, so we can move it at a future date, but just snug is fine. So what we'll do now is we'll put some more staples in, and that's going to be the wire spacing of my insulators and wires I'm going to run on the fence line. Again, I'm not hammering them in all the way just so I have room to work. I can always put them in further. Okay, now I'm ready for the wire. Okay, so the first wire we're going to run is our bottom wire, and generally it's a cold or a ground wire, so we'll need no additional insulation. I've got my wire spacing here with my staple. I've already put my crimps on here so they're on the correct spot, and I'm going to go ahead and run my wire through this. Depending on how you start your wire around the post, the wire's on my side, so this would be the inside or pasture side of the fence. If you wanted it on the outside, you just start the other direction. So what I'll do here is I'll straighten this tab out. I'll just make a little 45-degree turn in it, and I'll slip these crimps over this end. Now another thing, you can kind of play with this a little bit to see how much gap you want here between your posts and everything. It doesn't have to be super tight, but just don't get yourself in a bind, and we'll go ahead and crimp them. And again, I always take my tail. Sometimes if this was a hot wire, you could actually use this as your jumper. So if you pre-planned that you're going to go to a next level higher wire that was going to be hot, you can use this little pigtail as your jumper wire to the next to get electricity through your fence. But in this case it's not, so I'm just going to bend it over, and then we have your fence. So then now we'd come to this post, and we would drive another staple here and just continue on through our fence line. And that would be our bottom non-insulated wire. So now I'm going to cut this off, and then we'll go do one with an insulator on, and I'll tie it versus using crimpers just to show you a different example. So first we got to come around the post. I'm going to do this tie totally different than I did the other one. This is all going to be with hands and no tools required. So I cross it here, then I'll go under and make a common knot, but then I'll come over it. So under, over, then under. So what this does is it gives you a little spring tension right here in that knot. So if anything was to hit the fence and you didn't have a spring on it in line, this would take some of that cushion in that bubble there. So what I'll do now is I'll turn a 90-degree handle in the end of that fence, and I'll come here and I'll just wrap it. So the faster you kind of do this, the better, because it heats up this wire, and then it'll be easier to break here in a minute. And you want at least 7 wraps on this for it to keep. 8 or 9's better, but if you can get 7, that's great. And you want those coils as tight to each other as you can get it, so it's got something to support each other on. Okay, so now that I've got this wire getting hot and I've got over 7 wraps, I'm going to turn it and do a 90-degree turn, and the wire snaps off, and you have a clean cut there. We prefer porcelain insulators. They have a lot longer longevity, and the sun doesn't affect them nearly as much. So in this situation, we're playing with the guide wire here that we put earlier. So if we was to put the insulator back here, you can see that the hot fence would be shorting out on this tensioner. So we can cheat it a little bit and bring the insulator out here a little farther so we have room to work and don't have to worry about our fence shorting out on the brace wire. So I'll kind of roughly measure it out here to where I about want it, and then I'll add about 6 or 8 inches for my tying, and we'll cut it. It's always important to remember to hold on to your spool side of your wire, because it can get out of hand pretty quick. So we'll go ahead and put this wire up. Okay, back to our insulator. So these insulators have 2 sides here. So the holes are offset each side of it. So when we feed this through in here, we want the wire to come back on the deep end. So I'll show you an example here. So we want it to look like this. See how it's elongated there versus like this, where that's the short side, because there's a whole lot less strength here. And here we're working with the whole insulator, so it gives you a lot more structure and stability. So anyway, we'll come back here and we're gonna not put the bubble in it like we did last time. We're just gonna tie it and make sure it's not gonna get into our brace wire. So you wanna bring it over as tight as you can to get those notches and that wire all locked in together. And again, I'm gonna give myself a little handle and I'm gonna twist. And again, you want at least 7 wraps, as close to each other as you can get them. And then when you get to your last one, you just twist it that way and it comes loose. And then you have your short free insulator on there. So now what you would do is you'd run your actual line wire through this end where there's no wire through there, and you do the exact same deal. Okay, so talking about this little insulator here that fits over the wire. So we talked how it's important to measure your insulators out to make sure they're not going to get your brace wire. But in the case that you don't, and your insulator was set back here and your hot wire was touching this, all you would need to do is slip this on there, and that would be the barrier between the hot wire and the brace wire, which would ground it out. Now that we've put this H-brace together, you can see the step-by-step process of building one correctly. And remember, this is the foundation of your whole fencing system, so it's important to take your time, buy quality products, and put it in correctly.